Bitcoin's, hovering around $30,000. So that's almost 2 times your investment. So the average price looks good. The supply and demand fundamentals look good. The daily volatility scares people away. Is the notion that institutions are buying the dip, in your opinion, accurate?
Yeah, I mean, can just give you an idea of yesterday was our biggest day ever. It was
Really?
actually the biggest day of my career in terms of,
Interestingly enough, that's January 11,
yeah,
the first. So yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I guess it's worth mentioning the date. So yesterday, we did not have one sell order at all. But we had the biggest day we've ever had by far on the buy side, and most of it went into Bitcoin. Like 95% of it went into Bitcoin. And I've been doing this for a while now, and for me personally, it was the most amount I've ever sort of been a part of moving in on such a day. So that was really great to see. And then as far as the institutional interest in buying the dip, I mean, I think there's just a natural demand for institutions right now that are just electronically picking up the dip whenever Bitcoin moves down. From our side, we saw one of our private companies that we're dealing with to help them move again part of their treasury into Bitcoin. They made some purchases over the last couple of weeks, and they didn't get nervous when Bitcoin took a huge move down. They doubled down and bought more. So that was really refreshing to see as well, because it was sort of their first time moving into Bitcoin after researching it for quite a while, and to see them not get shook off a quick move down, a significant move down was really refreshing to see. And yeah, some of the closed end funds that you mentioned started off the day right before the bell. I think GBTC, Grayscale's Bitcoin fund, was around a 53% premium to market, and QBTC and some of the other closed-end funds were in the 40s. So, I mean, I even tried to sell right away in the morning, because you want to harvest those premiums, especially when it's so off like that. And I think that's what we saw. So naturally, those funds are going to move down quite a bit, and then it happened to move down in and around the same as Bitcoin. So I don't think that there's really any cause for concern. We see this so many times, and it was really, really great to see that a lot of the new entrants that we deal with, the big money who came in above 30K, as to dip their toes into Bitcoin for the first time again in a big way. They weren't shook, and instead they certainly were buying the dip. So I can imagine that even though we're a pretty small outfit, that held true for probably a lot of the desks out there in exchanges. Again, we don't see any activity on the retail side. So I think the retail investors are more likely to sort of panic sell than some of the money that has taken the time to really research what they're about to move into. And if you, as painful as it might be to see Bitcoin make a big move down, if you're knowledgeable in the space and you aren't comfortable in your Bitcoin position, it's a great time to accumulate. So that's what we saw.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, because it validates, first of all, my perspective on what was happening yesterday. But there is also this notion that if you were to have an ETF listed on a Bitcoin ETF to get listed, and the more of these that come up, the more you'd be moving investors away from cryptocurrency exchanges and into traditional investment vehicles, which ultimately means that the volatility of Bitcoin on an exchange would eventually reduce significantly if you have enough of those institutional and traditional financial products on the market for people to participate in, which first reduces volatility. It may reduce, price, right, in to a certain extent, because there's not enough buy orders on the exchanges, specifically directly. But I don't see how an ETF can negatively impact the cryptocurrency market as a whole, or the Bitcoin market specifically. And do you see ETFs being neutral, positive, or somewhat of a negative thing for the cryptocurrency market? I mean, the whole concept of people owning, controlling their wallets and controlling their private keys and being able to own their own currency, is now not really the core objective of cryptocurrency investors, because all they want is convenience and security at the end of the day, if they're going to make that investment. So how do you see ETFs coming about on the market? I mean, we do have a few of them already, but maybe you have a different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have an ETF yet. The funds that that are out there right now, they're closed-end funds. So they come with pretty high, borderline egregious management fees. Because essentially they're not really doing much other than just securing the Bitcoin that comes in based on the inflow of capital to acquire that Bitcoin. So the management fees are sometimes over 2%, which can really eat into your profits long term. And they also come with a really high premium. So do I think ETFs would be negative on the price? Absolutely not. I mean, on a day-to-day basis, we talk to individual investors to bring them in one by one. Well, the reason why Bitcoin isn't being sold right now by financial advisors is because there's no way for them to sell Bitcoin and make money off of it. So an ETF would allow, instead of us going one by one and bringing in one person, well, instead now you can go to corner office brokers and position a Bitcoin ETF to them, and then they can go and turn that around. And whether it's them not having discretion over their clients' portfolios and having to bring them up and make allocations one by one, or those same brokers that have discretion over their client portfolios deciding to make a 1 or 2% allocation across all of their clients, and that when we're talking about the most verifiably scarce asset known to mankind, and then that much of a shift in demand for the 90% of the world, or the 90% of the investors who don't have exposure yet, because there is no real easy way that makes financial sense, for someone who doesn't want to pay a high premium and a crazy MER. Well, now it's really easy, and it's super fair in price. So I think that it would have the opposite effect, and I think that the price of Bitcoin would go much higher. And I think that right now, investors have a chance to front run Wall Street on that trade, because I think it's a matter of time. I don't know if it'll be this year. I mean, in the past 3.5 years of doing this, it seems like every single year there's been talks about an ETF, but it keeps getting pushed back, and I think we're coming up to a time now where it's imminent, and whether it's this year or next year or the year later, I think it would do wonders for the price of Bitcoin as opposed to the opposite. Buying an ETF is not really buying the underlying asset. It's buying it. And that's fine, but I think, and this also goes into another thought that I had the other day, which was, what is Bitcoin's true bottom, right? And people like myself who have a very high level, and I'm sure you as well, who have a very high level of very high level of conviction for Bitcoin, I can't imagine myself selling my Bitcoin, even if Bitcoin dropped 90%. The fundamentals, as long as those don't change, then my belief in Bitcoin won't change either. And I just wonder, it took me maybe a couple of years to get to that position where I feel that comfortable. But I wonder how many more of me are coming to light every single day. And that would be, in my opinion, the true bottom, because how many coins is that equal to? And you're not going to get that sort of exposure on an ETF, because the best thing you can do with an ETF is sell it for cash. I don't want cash. So the only way, for me to actually really have Bitcoin is to buy it separate from an ETF and off of an exchange or peer-to-peer. So I think that it would drive a lot of activity off of exchanges into ETFs. But I still think that every single day, and it's so early, so over the next 5-10 years, there'll be more and more people really understanding Bitcoin for what it is and wanting a piece of real estate on that blockchain.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think society is in need, the global society is in need of some sort of asset or store of value or currency or whatever they want to treat it as, but they need something to fall back on from the current monetary system or the current solutions or that are at hand. Because at the end of the day, money is just a tool for you to meet your ends, right? If you want to move around, if you want to buy a house, if you want to eat, if you want to live, you need money today is what's widely acceptable amongst communities and societies and people. But eventually, society as a whole, people themselves, you still feel there's this skepticism against or towards Bitcoin, but there's also this doubt towards the current system where the majority of people are worried about where things might go in the future or how things might unfold geopolitically, globally, economically. So all these changing economic conditions are affecting people's sentiment, people's mentality, people's perspective. And as long as things continue to move the way they are in the current environment, I mean, we've got a pandemic that's probably never ending until further notice. We've got economic situation around the world where people are out of jobs, where people cannot meet ends meet, they cannot pay their rent. There's a lot of issues happening around the world across different countries, and we don't see it because we mostly in the West and in most parts of the developed and developing worlds, we live in convenient circumstances and we have the comfortable means of survival. But the majority of the world don't have these comfortable means of survival. And I feel that, I always say this, so maybe in every conversation that I have about cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, that the socioeconomic construct of the world is not properly structured, and it is malfunctioning, and people need something to fall back on. And eventually Bitcoin is going to be that. Now, or something like Bitcoin will be that backdrop for people. And a Bitcoin ETF or financial products that are controlled by the same group of individuals or people that have brought the financial system to where it is today, inflation, poverty, debt, all these things, are going to issue products for the people who have the same people who are doubting the current system to buy a digital asset that is meant for them to control their destiny when it comes to their finances. So I think education around Bitcoin and why Bitcoin is eventually the day will come when people will start valuing their Bitcoin as their sats